This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to the Digital Dish,
a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. I'm Lois.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Jeannie. And we want to make sure smart women and their points of view were being heard. Welcome back, everybody. Oh, hi, Lois. How are you?
I'm good, Jeannie. How are you?
I'm good.
It's the new year.
Yes.
That's kind of exciting.
It is. And I am to be shamed because we did this interview with Ema Roloff at Naviant back in, I'm embarrassed to say, back in July. But it is such a pertinent subject. And she is such a great, entertaining interview because she does all kinds of cool things with social media. So I think everybody's going to really enjoy her. She's got some really great suggestions, and I think everybody's always interested in how to really promote themselves on it. But my favorite thing Ema does is she makes up words. She's a big advocate of making up words. And one word that she uses a lot is edutainment. And I think that's a hoot. What do you think of that, Lois?
Okay, so I have not heard her interview, so I'm guessing that since she's in social media and, she's obviously in the business world, she's probably trying to come up with creative ways to help incorporate more innovative social media sort of platforms, digital ways to communicate, to collaborate, to work within our sometimes old stuffy work environments. And so she's probably educating, but she's doing it in an entertaining way to get us interested into using some of the new technologies. Am I close?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She's so hilarious because she talks about how she has a pandemic inspired, she started doing digital stuff and it was pandemic inspired. So you all have to go out and find Ema Roloff. She's for Naviant. She's a director of sales, but give a good listen to Ema's conversation because she's a blast. Missy interviews her on this one.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So I think we should just roll it.
I think so too.
Hi, I am Missy Lawrence here, and I'm super excited about this episode of The Digital Dish. I've been fangirling about Ema for a while now, and so without any further ado, I want to just jump right in because I think we have so much to talk about, from OCM to relationship management, digital transformation. It's just people, and when you find someone who wants to geek out about people, relationships and behavior dynamics and how do you get people to stop doing stuff, start doing stuff, do things differently, this is just going to be a great talk. And so thank you so much, Ema, for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. My name is Ema Roloff, and I feel like the fangirl energy goes both directions. But I am the director of sales for our enterprise solutions division at the company that I work with, Naviant. Our focus is really process consulting and solution implementation for our customers as they are looking to manage a digital transformation. I specifically focus on the insurance industry and healthcare, but our team operates kind of across the board in a number of different industries, really looking at how organizations are interacting with all different types of content and then how they're driving processes that use that content to make decisions. And so I've been with them for almost 8 years, and then over the course of the last couple of years have spent a lot of time in the space of digital transformation on LinkedIn and TikTok and YouTube, which is how we got connected as well.
I know. So I'm like TikTok and YouTube. I am, and I don't know if Jeannie or Lois will be the same way, I'm one of those people who feels kind of like the anomaly, like an old soul. I like pen and paper, but I work in technology and digital transformation. I don't have a TikTok account. I fell in love with the idea of the ability to reach people who typically would not maybe be interested or think that they have some sort of way to contribute into things like a digital transformation or just working in technology or digital at all. But I found a post that you did, and one of the hashtags was edutainment. Oh my God, this is basically just a platform for me to get on my nerdy soapbox and be able to talk to people about stuff and things. around technology, around what it's like on the human side of digital, then I was inspired and then instantly intimidated because I have no idea where to even start. Like, how did you get started in creating videos and content for things that are kind of like not what you typically would think you would go to TikTok for?
Yeah. So first, edutainment is not mine. It is a dear friend of mine, Tony Grosso's making. But going back to the original question of how did I get into video, I have an education background, and so I went to school to be a teacher, and so presenting and teaching about technology has always been a huge part of how I sell and how I help our customers develop their solutions. And when COVID hit, like many other people and probably a lot of other salespeople, I had this like moment of, oh man, like what I've been doing isn't going to work. And if this goes on for longer than 2 weeks, which, you know, spoiler alert, it has.
Years later, right?
Yeah. I was having these conversations with my husband, who's in the sales and marketing consultation side of things. And I was like, how do I sell the way that I have with this consultative approach and this educational approach if I don't get to be in a room with people anymore? He said to me, well, why don't you start doing video? And my response to him was like, does anybody even watch video about process automation and digital transformation? And so he was like, I don't know, go figure it out. What's the worst that happens? No one watches it and you stop doing it. And so I called up one of our consultants. I tell him all the time he had no idea what kind of monster he was creating, but I called him and I said, hey, I've got this idea. I want to start an interview series, but I need somebody to do the first one with me. Are you game? And he was like, well, tell me what I need to do. And then I moved on to do one with our CEO, and then slowly but surely started reaching out to other industry leaders that I admired from things that they were writing on LinkedIn or posts that I had seen. And then it's just really grown from there. And as I got more comfortable and more confident doing video, the creative juices of like when I go out for a walk or I'm going for a run, all of a sudden it'd be like, ooh, I have this idea, or oh, I should reach out to this person to have this conversation. And it's really snowballed from there. And now I wish that I had a cooler hobby than thinking of digital transformation TikToks, but I can't get it out of my brain. So
this is the new cool. This geeky cool is the new black.
I'm good with it.
In your tenure in working in teaching and educating around technology to come up with creative solutions for content management, like what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen around digital transformation? This might actually be kind of a feeder question because I think I know what the answer is.
Yeah. So for anybody who does follow me, I don't think my answer to this question is going to be a shocker. I talk about it a lot, but as my career with Naviant has progressed and as I have started to see more and more implementations and watch those dynamics play out, where I see the most challenges or the most slip-ups is typically in our approach to change management and how we're bringing our people along on the journey. I am fortunate enough to have really great solutions that have a lot of power behind them to implement. And so typically when we see things kind of going awry, it's usually on that people side or maybe a little bit on the process side if we're stepping in and we've heard like, well, yeah, we implemented this tool that came out of the box and we didn't get the user adoption we were hoping for, and we found out that our process didn't fit what the solution that we put in place was. But again, it's always this kind of trundle back where if you start working back to the source, it's usually tied to change management in one way or another.
Well, how would you define change management? How would you just define it for someone who maybe has never heard that phrase before? They think they've heard it. Maybe it connects to something like a change board review, like technologically based change versus the people change.
My definition of change management is really looking at how your people engage with a process and will ultimately engage with technology. So again, my definition is really digital transformation centric, but looking at how your people will engage with the process and how they will engage with the technology and making sure that you are accounting for their views and thoughts on how those solutions should be implemented and helping them understand why you're making the decisions that you are along the way. This isn't saying that every single employee that you have has to be 100% on board with every requirement of your solution implementation, but it's taking their feedback, listening to what they're sharing with you and the why behind what they're sharing with you, and taking that into consideration as you move through what we all know is probably a multi-phased approach towards digital transformation across an organization. When it comes down to its basics, it's having a dialogue with your people and bringing them along on the process, and again, working through those interpersonal relationships that come with any organization.
I'm making a little word cloud as we're talking. And I heard joy, I heard humor, I heard teaching, I heard dialogue, interpersonal interaction. To me, this sounds almost like UX UI design thinking, but taking that and not applying it to a broad lens of who are ultimately the customers or the consumers of the technological value or feature or tool that you're delivering, but just those who are interacting with it on the employee side internally, maybe. How does one go about creating that type of environment and climate that typically people don't think of with technology or digital work?
Well, I think authenticity, whether you are intentionally being funny or goofy or whatever else, that authenticity is what I think has started to shine through in my content a lot the more comfortable I've gotten. We all have our own inside jokes within our organization, or the things that we can maybe poke a little fun at, or the traditions and the things that we can do to make the work that we do more engaging. I think one of the places that I think you can bring that joy or that excitement and that momentum kind of gathering into your change management approach is through celebrating small wins along the way. I kind of touched on the idea of sharing the why already, but usually when I break down change management, I break it into really 3 key steps. And there are many people with much more sophisticated models than what I'm about to share for how to manage change management. But I think when it comes down to like the bare bones basics of what you cannot ignore is having a clear vision and sharing that vision with your organization and helping your employees bridge the gap between understanding the organizational why and what's in it for them as an individual. And that is, the basis of all of this, and that communication strategy then starts with that why and continues throughout the entire process of your project. And I don't think it's possible to over communicate, because eventually if people have got what they need, they just might not read the email or watch the video that you send. But for the people that are still looking for information and looking to understand what's happening, you want to be able to provide those folks with that information that they need to feel comfortable with that change. And then going back to what your original question was of looking at how do we infuse joy or excitement and that type of thing into it, celebrating along the way those little wins that come. And it could be something as simple as sending out an email that recognizes the work that certain people in the team have put to get you to a point in the project. So we got through requirements validation, and a special shout out to these 5 subject matter experts who really put in a lot of time to make sure that this solution was going to meet our needs. Or we got through user acceptance testing, and we're going to have a lunch to recognize how much work went into every single one of you testing out this solution. I've had customers too who will do things like when they get to a go live, they'll bring in a cake that says like, congratulations on your go live, and like have a slice of cake with the project team. Doing those small things just help recognize the work that's going into that process and like make people feel like the work that they're doing has a purpose and has a reason behind it. And it will carry you through your digital transformation with so much more momentum than I think we give it credit for.
What I'm hearing is recognition, but you have to understand how and when people want and feel they need to be recognized. When you talk about relevant and current ways of working, current digital transformation, tech modernization, artificial intelligence, people are probably more expectant to be able to bring their authentic selves to work and have those inside jokes and have that joy and have that sardonic humor, and where in the past that might have just been commiserating or complaining, but now we've got this organizational inside joke. Like that's something I literally just put a hashtag in front of, because that's probably a whole thing. In working with different levels of different multi-generations. As a woman in digital, like we already have our own unique perspective, typically being one of the minorities in the room. But then this concept of being a millennial versus Gen X or baby boomer, right? Like, how has that played out in terms of all of these relationships?
So when I take a look at my career, I started at Naviant when I was relatively young. I had one big girl job prior to that. I worked in a franchising office that helped franchisees go and open their own fast food restaurants. That experience, honestly, is what has helped me not feel as intimidated going into the room with a C-suite and being who I am. Because those franchisees that were coming into a restaurant, and everyone will smirk when I tell them this story, but I had franchisees who were incredibly successful with all different types of careers, lawyers and doctors and successful business owners that had made millions of dollars. And they would come to try and train in the restaurant, and I would say, great, here's a 15-year-old who's going to teach you how to scoop ice cream. And a big part of what I did while they were being evaluated as a potential franchisee was watch how they did in that scenario and watch how they worked with those people. And then again, when you watch these people who have gotten to a point in their career where they have millions of dollars to invest in a restaurant, watching them struggle with something that a 15 or a 16-year-old kid could do in their sleep humanizes them a lot. And you start to realize that it doesn't matter how much success someone has under their belt or what their background is, people are people. And when you can get that thought process through your mind, then you start to think, okay, when I go in and I talk to these people, they are people too. Let's figure out what makes them tick as a person and get to know them as a person, and then we can get to the business stuff. It's gotten a little easier for me now that I have more in common with people. So now I have kids that I can talk about. I'm not a 24-year-old who, doesn't have quite the same life experiences. But even that being said, being a young mom who has a 6-year-old is very different than being the father of 4 grown adult children. But it's figuring out where you have those shared experiences with people and where you can kind of click on that authentic level, and then just carrying through that authenticity through your relationship. And kind of by accident, I've done some stuff in meetings. I just by nature will do kind of embarrassing stuff when I'm in these scenarios. And after you've lived through that experience of saying something that feels really, really silly in a room full of people that are twice your age and have much more life experience, and you realize that nobody kicked you out of the room for it, it gets a lot less intimidating. And the more at-bats that you have with that kind of thing, the more you realize, like, oh no, people will like me for being a person, and that's okay, and I can be the person that I am.
Love it. I love it so much. So what I'm hearing is tapping into, because I kind of want to wrap this up on this note, because I heard you say human and humanize, and I know my co-hosts are going to just, okay, Missy, we get it. We know how you feel about the human side of digital, but there's this frameworks and a structure, methodology, and an approach to how you actually do these things that you probably have stumbled into. And some people naturally have this innate ability to read the room or feel comfortable being their authentic self. But there are things from like David Rock and the Neuro Leadership Institute that can actually take a structured methodology and approach to building better relationships. So there is a science behind how you build great relationships. And then I also heard you say, start with why. So my brain immediately went to like Simon Sinek. If no one's understood or picked up that book, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, he's also the GOAT. Again, I started out fangirling. Now I'm probably at some sort of altar worshiping. I'm so excited. I think the big takeaway for me is that if everyone approaches all their work with this learning aptitude, started off as an educator, and I started off my career in early childhood education, looking at how do we get preschoolers, ready for where they need to be 18, 20 years from now, because in the Department of Labor, we have a labor gap in STEM. We don't have enough people who are studying this from like an occupational handbook perspective. So taking data, taking the neuroscience, taking the behavior, taking the relationships, all of that ties into an effective digital transformation. And that can either be exhausting or extremely exciting, depending on which E you fall into. And I think this E, Emma, is just brilliantly been able to weave both.
Well, thank you. One thing I do want to add for anybody that, again, wants a lesson in change management, going back to what you said of early childhood education, I've got a couple of little kids here. Wayne Butterfield's podcast, we talked about this, and I used this example, but I've recognized that change and the need for change management is something that is innate to us from the moment that we're born. And as a parent, you learn the importance of managing a change and managing expectations with your kid. I told the story of taking my daughter to go get a flu shot. And one year I was so concerned she was going to have a freak out that I did all sorts of things that now in retrospect are change management behaviors. We watched TV shows, we talked about it, we played with toys, we did all of these things to get her ready for what it was going to be like, and we went in and it was no problem. And then the next year I assumed last year we did the flu shot with no issue. And so I brought her in and I made the mistake of not telling her until the day we were going. And it was like bringing an angry cat to the vet. And she was up on the back of the couch and screaming. And it was probably more traumatic for me as the parent than it was for her as the child. But that was the most oh my gosh, I didn't manage this change at all for her, and that is completely on me.
Yeah, because what I talk about all the time is going into COVID, we're my leaders, they've gone through a reduction in force before, or they've had to lay people off before, or furlough people, or we've gone through tough times, and we make this unnecessary assumption that people have skill sets that they may or may not have, or can apply them within a certain climate or an environment. So I think we just hit on maybe 3 more episodes.
Happy to come back. You let me know.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, again from our really awesome interview. Lois, what did you think?
Oh, that was such a great interview. First of all, Missy did a fantastic job, as always. And I just, if you could see my head as she was talking, I was doing a lot of probably that nodding thing, oh my God, I get that. Because
Yeah.
So I'm in sales. And when she was talking about, holy cow, we used to go sit in front of people and be able to correspond and tell stories. And how do you sell consulting when you're not able to sit in front of people? So I just thought, I wish I could have talked with her back in April when she was talking about the videos, because it would have saved us a lot of grief. But that's what we had to do. You had to figure out, if you want to tell your stories, how do you create videos and creative ways to tell stories? Now, I'm not at TikTok yet, so I clearly have more to learn from her. So I don't know. I thought she was just really great.
I did too. There's 2 key things takeaway that I had. One is that connecting the non-technical people to some of the digital reality going on, whether it is in a social media atmosphere or, my favorite story to tell is way back in the day when I was working, 1990, when I was working at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and they were getting ready to start this whole Globex thing. And there was a couple of guys standing around having a talk about moving files, except they said, we've got to move the interface to Node X and then transition to the server and the blade. And I'm looking at them going, so you're just saying move the files from here to here, right? And they looked at me like, she understands. I'm like, yes, why don't you speak English? So that's just my point of view on that. And I feel like that's such a challenge, which is why Emma was such a great way of breaking it down and putting it in real terms, I feel like,
Yeah.
Well, that's the OCMs, that it's taking it from the perspective, I wrote this down, is understanding their views and thoughts to put it in the language of the people that you're talking to. It's not how you think you should sound based on what you know is going on. It's what's your audience, the folks that you're impacting? How do you make it more relatable to them? And, we forget often sometimes, and it's just, she had a great way of really talking about how you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also love the way Missy, as the interviewer, and it's been interesting for me to watch all this past year, is that having a new host, yes, Missy, excellent, has taken us in an interesting and a really good direction. I feel like the organic change has been about building that confidence and to people to understand that digital isn't that outside of their reach. So Missy, I want to thank you for leading us in that direction. I think it's pretty interesting. I think it's really taken us
Like, just definitely not by design. I think it's just, I think you mentioned it before in an earlier episode, Jeannie, where you said everyone who has any business, like whether it's underwater basket weaving, you're going to have a website or you're going to have an app. So like everyone is digital these days. And I just thought it was really cool that Ema started off as a teacher, right? And so now she's like fully into technology because she's teaching it and she's educating people on the needs. And then that's sales because it's the awareness, and she's bringing all of that teacher goodness. Not, I mean, we need teachers to be teaching, but I'm not saying anything like that. But she's bringing all of that teacher goodness and can, as a woman, be in digital and have a role in the future. So I just thought that was incredible.
Yeah. Plus, she makes up words. Made up words.
Yeah, it's the joy that she brings. I think I mentioned that too. It's just joy and humor to things that feel really like mathematical and scientific and technical. And that is what adoption is all about, and employee experience is all about, and change management. It really is like, let's make behavior change and employee change really relevant and cool and meet people where they are. So I just thought she was fantastic.
Yeah.
One additional thing onto that, too, I gotta say, is maybe the influences that has is going to be on young girls, because when digital IT was all about coding and, things like a lot of math and all those things that tend to, in the past, scare girls away. Hopefully, right, they still can get into that, but it's also, we need all kinds of skills in digital, including that human behavior and how you can relate and how you can make it fun and cool in games. Like, really, digital's for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a wrap. We've got a great year coming up, so thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you like our podcast, please subscribe and rate and review us. Thank you.